Hello and welcome to Hamilton the Podcast. I'm Vinton Bayne.
I'm Robbie Hurlocker.
And today we have a special guest with us, Amanda Fortney.
Hello.
So Amanda, how did you find out about Hamilton the musical?
I have a ton of theater friends and musician friends that were really into it before I ever actually listened to it. My son was doing ragtime at OU when
fun.
we were first actually introduced to it by my husband, Justin. He was trying to get us to listen to, I think it was maybe an NPR first listen or something.
Yeah.
And Eli and I just were kind of like, oh, that's fine, but we're really into ragtime right now, so we just want to listen to that all the time.
I only have so much room in my heart
Yeah.
for a musical.
Exactly. So we were like, oh, whatever, that's fine. We'll listen to that some other time. After ragtime was over, we started listening to Hamilton and quickly became obsessed. It's like you start listening, and then before you know it, that's all you talk about and listen to.
It is non-stop.
Exactly.
So do you have any interesting stories to tell about your relationship with Hamilton?
I do. My son's voice teacher got to go see Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
She knows one of the ensemble members, Sasha Hutchings. She's from
Nice.
OCU. She is an Oklahoma person.
Represent.
So, yes, she was able to go backstage as a result, and she met Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I'm assuming the other cast, but she got a program and had it signed by Lin-Manuel
What?
Miranda for Eli. And so we are going to be framing that. and
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It says Siempre on it, exclamation point. It's like,
That is
pretty cool.
awesome.
That's amazing.
Wow, I'm jelly right now. On today's episode, we've decided that we're going to talk through the songs That Would Be Enough, Guns and Ships, and History Has Its Eyes on You. So the very first song, That Would Be Enough, it features Eliza Hamilton and Alexander Hamilton.
So one of the things I had heard about this song is that it was written very quickly by Lin-Manuel. He wrote it in 45 minutes, and the reason he said it was so quick was because it was very personal to him. He said that this song was kind of like a love song to his wife, and when he showed it to her and said that, he sung it for her, I guess, she said, oh, is that how you want me to feel? And he goes, no, that's how I feel toward you.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that he feels like Eliza's voice or like Hamilton's voice?
Like Eliza. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So I thought that was really cool that this is his like love song to his wife, and that's why it was so easy for him to write this one.
That's fascinating. One of the things I like about this song a lot is how in pop culture, we often see that a lot of creators are afraid to show masculine characters feeling vulnerable and feeling expressive and those types of weaker emotions, so to speak. But here, Hamilton, the star of our show, has a moment of weakness. He's just been shunned by the commander-in-chief of the army. He's just been sent home by Washington, and we're going to see him in this song confronting a lot of fear and a lot of doubts about his own securities. He's insecure about certain things about his future, and his stable person, the one that is able to be there to support him specifically, is his wife, Eliza Hamilton, who's able to just stand up as a pillar of support for him while he's feeling vulnerable. And I love that about their relationship dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You have Eliza here who is content and she's satisfied with what they have, and then you have Hamilton who's never satisfied, and that's a really interesting dynamic in the song.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because at the beginning of the show, you see Eliza as someone that just seems very content, and you don't really see her as like a strong female figure like her sister Angelica. But later on in the show, you realize she's probably one of the strongest women out there, and just unbelievable what all she went through and what she did with her life after Hamilton died.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this is a very early representation of her that you aren't seeing her. She just sounds kind of like, oh, I'm a supportive female, like supportive wife. And that's about it. It's what it seems like, I think, initially.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this song, though, does take us to that point where we see that there are two types of confidence being portrayed in these two characters on stage right now. That the confidence we've been seeing throughout this show is this ambition that Alexander knows that there are so many things he hasn't done, but he can do them. And he's going to pursue it because he's an ambitious person. But then Eliza has a type of contentment and a type of confidence in who she is as a person, so that she's not weak. She's not weak at all in her willingness to stand where she is. She's content, and she knows who she is, and she says, I know who I married, and she's just very comfortable in life. And I think that those two characteristics of ambition and contentment are really important in their own rights. And it's interesting to see two strong characters complementing each other in a relationship like that, to where they really do have a good, interesting relationship dynamic here.
Yeah, contentment is often portrayed as weakness, and it's not necessarily. I mean, there are times when people might settle for things, but she's not settling. She's just happy where she is. That doesn't make her any weaker than Hamilton.
Yeah, it's important to enjoy the things that you're fighting for and not just enjoy the fight of them. So Hamilton's like out there fighting the war, wanting this change, and he's enjoying the fight. But she's at home and she's like, let's enjoy the things we're fighting for. This is what we're fighting for here, is this family and this peace that we have.
Yes,
and that you can experience if you come home and be with us, you know?
It's really good.
One of the things I love about this show is when lyrics come back later.
The callbacks.
And one of those that happens a couple times later in the show is from this song, when she's like, look at where you are, look at where we started, the fact that you're alive is a miracle.
Yeah, the look
that
around,
would be
look
enough. And that comes back later and nonstop. And then one of my favorite moments in the whole show is at the end during It's Quiet Uptown, when Hamilton is saying it to her.
Yeah.
And he's like, just hear me out. That would be enough. Because he had messed up, royally messed
absolutely.
up.
Yeah, you
and
see the positions kind of
he's like, if you would just hear me out, that would be enough. You don't have to say you love me again. You don't have to do anything. Just listen to what I have to say, and that would be enough. And it's just beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and that whole idea of just, they absolutely respect one another. Because Eliza looks at him and says, I don't pretend to know the challenges you're facing, like the worlds you keep creating and erasing in your mind. I don't pretend to be in the weeds of all the stuff you're going through. But then later Hamilton looks at her and says, I don't pretend to know all the things you're facing.
Another position switch.
Yeah.
And he also says, I know who I married. Like,
yes.
It's just really...
it's such a cool callback.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think it's interesting that in the lyrics, if you're just listening to this, Hamilton's first line is, how long have you known? And you're almost like, wait, what's going on? Visibly on the stage, she comes out visibly pregnant. She's got like, a big cushion in her costuming. And so if you're watching it, you can see that she's clearly pregnant. It's actually kind of funny because she says she's only known for a month, but she's obviously way more than a month pregnant. She would have known for a little while. I mean, they obviously didn't have pregnancy tests back then, but they would know after, the first 2 missed periods that something was up, and then they could go to the doctor, get things checked out. It's a visual cue for the audience, so they know what's going on. They can see it. But when we're listening, we have that bit of misdirection there. We don't understand exactly.
Yeah, the first time I listened through this song, I imagined that the staging had like maybe a cradle on the stage. Look at how I've decorated this place for the baby room is ready. Like, look around, put all the pieces of the puzzle together because you're a smart guy. So I was thinking that, but yeah, it's absolutely, she comes on, she's visibly pregnant. It's an interesting staging cue that you really do need to kind of visually know what's going on.
Yeah, and I think it's funny how she says a chance to meet your son, and they had no idea if it was a boy or a girl at that point yet. Little creative liberty there.
Yep.
And after she clarifies that she's already known for a month or so that she's been pregnant, Hamilton specifically gets a little bit shocked, like, Eliza, you should have told me. You should have told me about these things. And I think it's interesting that she says, I wrote to the general a month ago. Yeah,
it's funny because she could have probably written to him. I mean, he was at the time the person getting Washington's letter, but it seems like she specifically went over his head, knowing that he would not come home if she, and that's what seems to be implied here, that he would not come home if she just asked him and said, hey, we're having a son. He's like, that's awesome. I'm really excited, but I have a war to fight.
Yeah, I knew you'd fight until the war was done.
But she goes above his head and sends it to Washington going, hey, send him home. He needs to come home. I'm having a son.
Yeah, and the impact of that just makes that previous scene where Washington finally sends Hamilton home so impactful. It's so meaningful and emotional because you know from this line that Washington was aware of what was happening at home. And so when he tells Hamilton, who seems to have this avant-garde, devil-may-care attitude about his own life, he says, look, I need you alive. Your wife needs you alive. Mm-hmm. Go home, Alexander.
Yeah, and you see Alexander repeating, you should have told me, which kind of to me implies that he was like, I would have come home. I mean, he may not have, but he at least believes that he would have. And then she says, I'm not sorry, which is that line of like, listen, my family comes before this war. This war is great and all, and it's amazing, but this is my family we're talking about, and that comes first. I'm not sorry.
Yeah, she knows what she's living for.
Yeah. And then you get this line how lucky we are to be alive right now. And that kind of has two different meanings, because earlier you saw that said, and it was like during the revolution, how lucky of a time to be alive. We're here in this revolution, things are changing. But now it's like in the middle of the war, people are dying left and right. Hamilton could have been shot so many times and killed, but how lucky we are to be alive right now. We've actually made it. We're still alive. We're living through this war. So it's not necessarily the time you're living in, it's that you're still surviving.
Yeah. So it's not just the revolutionary situation where there are ideas floating around in the air. It's that now we actually could have lost our lives.
Yeah.
One of the things that Hamilton expresses when he's confronting this big situation, like he has this stress and this tension and this drama of the war going on and all the interpersonal conflicts between him and Washington specifically, and he comes home to confront this big news. And this big news is that he's going to have to be a dad. And he's going to have a family to support. And he looks at Eliza and says, do you relish being a poor man's wife?
Yeah.
Unable to provide for your life. It's like he's so confident at every other moment in this musical, almost all the time. He's so confident about his abilities to rise up to the challenge, to overcome whatever is going to attack him, whatever obstacle is in his course. He's so ready to rise up to that challenge. But here he's like, oh my goodness, I don't even know if I can provide for you. I'm a poor guy. I haven't gotten the command that I wanted. I haven't become a war hero yet. I don't have the status that I need. I don't make a lot of money. Eventually, you'll see that when Hamilton does leave the army, he actually decides not to accept his soldier's pension from the Continental Congress because he doesn't want to be seen as someone that's actually profited from the government itself. So he wants to be above reproach when it comes to government funds when he goes into the new government. So he actually turns down certain funds for himself as a soldier, but he's looking at her now and he's like, oh my goodness, we might need some money.
Yeah, and that line is actually almost an exact quote from a letter he wrote her. I think it's just adds in the word soberly in the actual letter. Do you soberly relish being a poor man's wife? And it's kind of funny, when he dies, she is left with a lot of debt because he didn't accept the soldier's pension, and he left her with a lot of debts when he passed away, and she had to like kind of scrounge and do a bunch of different things to get money. But you saw that after that, even, she was always concerned with giving money more than she was concerned with getting the money. She was more concerned with taking care of others and taking care of herself.
Yeah. She was left with so much debt that she actually had to sell the Grange, her family home, for a while. And then she did appeal to the Congress saying, hey, you know that money my husband turned down? As the widow of a soldier, I should have the rights to that money. And so she had to kind of fight for it a little bit just so that she could put food on the table for her kids and put a roof over their heads and be able to actually take care of what she needs. But you can see throughout her life, she does say in this song, we don't need a legacy. We don't need money. She's not looking for money as a way of benefiting herself. She is absolutely looking for a way to give to her family, to take care of people. Throughout their life, Alexander and Eliza were they actually took in orphans as they were living together for a while. And then when she died at the end of the musical, you see she founded some orphanages and was working with situations where she could actually give money to others.
Yeah, and it's funny that also that line, we don't need a legacy. It's thanks to her that Hamilton has a legacy at all. Without her, he wouldn't have had one.
Yeah, I've only read like the very beginning of the 700-page autobiography. Not autobiography. He's dead. The biography was talking about how she was just so passionate about making sure people knew what he did. She like religiously went through all the papers, had her son help go through all the papers so people know what he did. And it's kind of funny because he was the one that was so obsessed with his legacy. And then after he dies, she kind of carries on the tradition of making sure his legacy is secure.
Right.
I love the 3-beat that kind of comes into this moment where she says specifically, oh, let me be a part of the narrative here. And so in this moment, you see that she's saying, like, she's looking at Hamilton as the one that's controlling this narrative, both literally in the musical and kind of in their own lives. It's like, just let me be a part of the story that's happening. Let me be a part of your life. Let me play this role here. And then later in Burn, which it just breaks my heart when I hear this part, she says, I'm erasing myself from the narrative. This story you're telling, Alexander, I don't want to be a part of this. I do not want to be in this anymore. You've betrayed me, and I am out.
They have no right to know how like what I said or what I wrote. Yeah. I'm taking myself out of this narrative.
And it's so much more emotionally powerful if you have that first beat of saying, let me into this narrative. She wanted in to begin with, and now she's like, nope, I'm out. History's not going to know. And then she comes back in, and at the end of the story, she says, putting myself back in the narrative. And like we said, she then is in charge of his legacy. She's telling the narrative. She's the one in charge of this narrative now, and she is making sure that all of Hamilton's enemies who are trying to defame him are not going to get a say in this. She is going to tell the story of who Hamilton was, because she knows who she married and she wants the world to know, and she's going to try to insert herself back into that narrative and let everyone know who he was.
Right, and by the end of it, she really is the one controlling that narrative.
Yeah.
One of the lines that really does slay me every time I hear this, like, up until this moment in the soundtrack specifically, my jaws just dropped. I'm just amazed by all the things happening and all the things that are going on. The first moment in this musical that actually just grips my heart and rips it out of my chest is when Eliza's looking at her husband and she says, "Let this moment be the first chapter where you decide to stay, and I could be enough."
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that gets me every time, where she's just wanting him to be as content with their family and as content with her, and he can never be satisfied.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it just breaks my heart that this powerful, confident, content woman is having to be with someone that is never going to be, like, at least in this moment, she understands that she isn't really sure whether she is enough. She knows that he wants to fight until the war's over. She knows that he wants to rise to have a big legacy, and she doesn't feel like she is enough. And so that sets up the big decision for our protagonist here, where she is asking him to stay. She's asking him to stay with the family, to stay with her, to let their family be enough for him. And she's saying, hey, we have a lot going on here. We have a lot to live for. Look how much you've accomplished, and look what you could accomplish at home. If this child just had a fraction of your smile or a fragment of your mind, then we could actually have a family that really mattered, and you could act like your family is the most important thing in your life. And so the first option on his plate right now is stay home, become a family man, and let that be your consuming legacy. In the next song, he's going to be receiving his second alternative on the table, where he's deciding between, is he going to stay at home and be a family man and let that be his legacy, or is he going to accept the command that he's been pursuing for so long and follow Washington instead of Eliza?
So that takes us into the next song, Guns and Ships. And this song is really impressive. This is a musical that fits 20,000 words into about 2.5 hours. And in this song, you have a line where there's 19 words spoken in 3 seconds. It's amazing. I heard some people discussing whether this was the fastest line in a musical, and I'm like, of course it is. How could it not be? And Sondheim actually has a song called Not Getting Married Today and a show called Company.
Yes.
Where
it's so fast.
Yeah, a character is frantically speaking, and I had to look it up because I hadn't heard of it before. I'm assuming you guys both had. This character is just frantically speaking, and it's so fast and so long.
It's crazy fast.
It's so impressive.
Sondheim's known for doing that, like just word vomit on the audience, where your jaw's dropped and you can't do anything but just take it all in and let it wash over you.
Yeah.
So as he's prone to do, Aaron Burr introduces this scene specifically by coming in, asking the ludicrous question of, how does a ragtag volunteer army in need of a shower somehow defeat a global superpower? Yeah. How do we emerge victorious from this mess that we're in order to leave the battlefield waving Betsy Ross's flag?
Hold on, you just left out one of the best words in the whole show.
Quagmire.
Yes.
I know.
I love that he drops Quagmire into the lyrics.
You're right, that's good.
Especially for an amazing rap song like this, that the word Quagmire is in it.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
Yeah, someone brought up a note, and I don't know, it's reaching a little bit, but I thought it was still interesting. Quagmire refers to swampland. Usually people use it when they're saying, like, it's a sticky situation, it's a hard situation to get out of, but they talked about how you have blood-soaked land. The blood has turned this into swampland.
Oh,
so many people have died. And I was like, that's really good imagery.
Yeah.
It is.
A nice little reference here to another person from the Revolutionary era who doesn't make another appearance in the show, where you talk about Betsy Ross's flag flying above the troops.
It's kind of interesting how Burr starts this song, too. It's the same way he starts the whole musical, except how he usually talks about Hamilton, he's now talking about the Continental Army, this new nation. They're the underdog, like Hamilton, coming up from this place where no one thought they would ever become anything. They thought they would just die early and end in squalor, but they're actually becoming something and doing something great here.
Yeah, I really like that. It kind of emphasizes how Alexander Hamilton sort of embodies the American dream and the American conflict and the American struggle that is happening here when they're trying to rise up out of where they've been for so long to overthrow the opposition, the people that are keeping them down specifically.
His story is our story as a nation, pretty much.
Yeah. And so he quickly turns, instead of talking about Alexander Hamilton, as he usually does, he says, yo, turns out we have a secret weapon, an immigrant you know and love.
Which is a bit of misdirection.
Yeah.
You start out with...
You think he's talking about Hamilton again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You start out with that same description that sounded like Hamilton, and the immigrant you know and love, but it's not Hamilton.
It's the other one. And
Lafayette.
I love that he brings in this, like, the string of two strings of alliteration with he's constantly confusing, confounding the British henchmen.
Right.
Everyone give it up for America's favorite fighting Frenchmen.
Lafayette.
So if both of you spend a lot of time practicing this song to see how quickly you can rap this,
Yes.
I think that that's like a rite of passage for most Hamilton fans.
Exactly. I just love all his wordplay. Like, he has another part. It's engaging him, escaping him, enraging him. Just all his words are just so brilliant. And I just love how he puts them together and makes them very fast somehow.
Right.
Rendezvous with Rochambeau. I mean, just all this great
Yeah, it's really brilliant.
alliteration and...
Yeah. By the rains, making redcoats redder.
Yeah.
Just poetically, this is fantastic. And then when you add Daveed Diggs' performance to it,
Yes.
it's just phenomenal.
Especially when he says, no one has more resilience or matches my practical tactical brilliance. It's just so brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing enough to talk that fast, but then in those rhymes and those twisting words.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know Lin-Manuel can freestyle this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen him freestyle stuff that's that
And during
brilliant.
this performance, it's not like Daveed Diggs is sitting down doing this. He's like standing up on the desk, dancing, jumping off the desk, running around while he's rapping that fast. I'm like, how do you do that?
Right. I've been in musicals before where I get a little exhausted from the choreography and then I'm trying to sing along with it and I'm a little out of breath and it is challenging. And when you have to throw so many words in, like I can rap this just as quickly now, but I don't know if I would be able to do it as actively as he does.
Yeah. Lafayette here is actually one of my favorite characters in the musical. He just astounds me. The actual history of this guy. He joined the military at 13.
Oh, man.
And then because of his passion of what was going on over here, he came to America at 18 to fight with us. And as we've mentioned before, he did that on a volunteer basis, not taking any money from us. I guess I'd read that he was one of the richest people in France at the time, which is really also interesting at that young of an age. So he comes over here to fight with us. And this confusing and confounding part, I read a specific battle that he was in where he was getting kind of surrounded. The British troops were coming in and there was going to be like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was a lot more of them and they were going to get slaughtered if they didn't get out of there. And he was getting surrounded by them. So he sent a small battalion to go attack and confuse them while they like went around the other way and disappeared while they were busy fighting this small regiment, thinking all the soldiers were fighting there. So the British like put all their attack on that small regiment as the larger army then escaped through the back. Someone mentioned him being like a military Houdini. He was really good at escaping and confusing them. We mentioned the guerrilla warfare before. They would just go in and attack and then disappear. That's how you had to do it when you have such small armies.
Engaging and escaping.
Yep.
And that is practical, tactical brilliance.
That's the guerrilla warfare we mentioned, engaging and escaping.
So when Lafayette specifically came to America, the French king, King Louis XVI, did not actually approve of him coming along. He wasn't coming as an official ambassador of France. He was coming on his own as an aristocrat who funded his own way. So when he does say, I go to France for more funds, I come back with more guns and ships, and so the balance shifts. In 1779, he goes back to France, and he's already become this rock star. He's already become this hero of the American Revolution. The Americans love him. The French people love him. And King Louis specifically had told him not to go for a while, at first at least. And so he puts him under house arrest just to kind of save face.
What?
And so he puts him under, like, it lasts about a week. And then he invites Lafayette to his castle and he's like, hey, as a member of my court, you've been doing great things. And so he's like trying to like save face, is like, I'm punishing you, but good job for all the things you've done over there in the American colonies. I appreciate that a lot. But he does go to France for 1779 and spends most of the year there. I think he was there. He left in February and then came back at the beginning of 1780 for this particular conflict. And during that time, he actually has his first son. Do you know what he named him?
No.
He named his first son George Washington Lafayette.
Nice.
He is so devoted to the American cause and what's going on in the American colonies. I don't know how accurate this is, but I did hear that once he died, one of his plans for his funeral is he had a ship send over several barrels of American dirt and American soil so that he could be buried in American soil even though he was being buried in France, because this was so like he bled for this country. And he did, like, we're going to talk about the French Revolution in the second act, and we're going to get into some really interesting drama and what happens to him and how he eventually becomes a fugitive from that particular bloody revolution. But here you see he is a rock star. He goes to France, does some amazing things there. He's writing to American and French ambassadors. He's working with Benjamin Franklin, actually, who's the American ambassador in Paris right now. And so second act starts off, you know, that Thomas Jefferson becomes the ambassador to France. Benjamin Franklin was laying the framework for that already. And so he was working with Benjamin Franklin. He was working with a few of the Americans and the French. When he comes back on a ship that's designed for speed, a ship that's designed for this to come across from France to the American colonies in about a month. And the name of this ship this is a lot of extra information, I know, but this name of this ship was really interesting to me because I think it's named after one of my favorite heroines. He sailed here on the Hermione.
I think Harry Potter came a bit after Lafayette was alive, Robbie.
Maybe there's a time turner
Or
thing.
so we think.
I don't know.
It's wibbly wobbly.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. No, okay, yeah. So the Hermione comes over. What made it fascinating to me, most of my research for this podcast I've been doing in books. I went to the library book sale and just got everything they had in the Revolutionary War. But I did look on Google recently and Googled the Hermione because I wanted to know more about this ship. And there was actually a reenactment where they rebuilt this ship just last year in 2015, I think.
Yeah.
And so they reenacted Lafayette's journey to America from France and on this model of that ship, and then his specific tour through the American colonies were reenacted there.
During my research, I came across a book that Sarah Vell of NPR fame had written about Lafayette, and she was talking about how famed he was and how excited people were to see him, that 2/3 of the New York City population arrived to see him come in on his boat.
Oh, man.
They were just there to meet him when he came in. And that every night that he was here, they threw another party in his honor. And that every stop he made, they tried to like one up each other on giving him honor and doing things for him, naming a school after him, naming a street after him. I'm going to build a statue of him.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of schools named after Lafayette. Yeah. He was really a rock star.
Yeah, and another funny little note. I didn't go too deep into this research, so I don't know all the details of it. But apparently during the war, he was so against the British and so for America just like conquering and winning that he was trying to convince Washington and others to attack Canada, to go invade Canada.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not enough that we're holding our own here in America. Let's invade Canada too. And it just shows his like gumption and his passion. He's like, let's do this thing.
Yeah, that's something he was doing when in 1779. When he was in France, he was actually working with some of the Spanish forces because the French and the Spanish had officially become allies, and they were trying to rally a naval force to attack the homeland, to attack Great Britain at the time. And some things fell through, and the British forces were a little bit too strong, and so that plan failed at that point. But so he came back and was fighting with the American forces at that point. But eventually, Count de Rochambeau brings over more French forces, and the entire American struggle changes.
Yep. Which is why they viewed Lafayette as a messiah figure. He saved everything.
Right.
So can I say something about Daveed Diggs?
Yes.
The rock star of this song. I kind of wonder, and you guys may know the answer to this, if Lin-Manuel wrote this part with him in mind.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Like, or if it was that fast when he originally wrote it, or if it became that fast when Daveed did it.
I have heard him talking about it in one of the interviews. It may have been with Stephen Colbert. I don't recall exactly. But he talks about how at the beginning of this musical, Lafayette's character is struggling with the English language. He's like...
this is from Colbert, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So he says, like, anarchy. Anarchy. How do you
Anarchy,
say?
anarchy.
Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce this. I use
anarchy.
Exactly. But now he's mastered the English language.
Yeah.
He is very much in control of this, and he comes on stage. He's not struggling with any of his words. He has some of the fastest rhymes in this show, and he's specifically going in and he says, making red coats redder with bloodstains, and I'm never going to stop until we make a drop, burn up, scatter the remains. I watch me engage in them, escape, and rage them out. I got to France, more funds, will come back with more guns and ships until the balance shifts. We rendezvous with Rochambeau, consolidate their gifts. And he goes into this whole rant where he is not struggling anymore. He has become an American hero.
Yeah.
Exactly. Have you guys heard about his backstory, W. Diggs?
No.
I don't know.
He was actually living on a train. He was like in New York
What?
before he was on Hamilton. Like he was
Whoa.
kind of homeless for a while. Just he would sleep on trains
That's
and on friends'
crazy.
couches, and he was just very, under the radar.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I'd heard that he has a rap group and from LA apparently called Clipping. I haven't actually had a chance to listen to them yet, but I heard that he does actually rap that fast in that group.
I feel like we may need to pause the podcast right now because I need to go research this rap group because I want to spend some time just listening to this guy.
Leslie Odom Jr., that plays Aaron Burr,
Uh-huh.
did just a single on his own. It was kind of an R&B style song, and he had W. Diggs rap on it. So you should check that
Awesome.
out too
Yeah.
if you haven't.
Adding it to the list right now.
So we mentioned Rochambeau here, and this was the commander-in-chief of the French forces that were sent to aid in the American Revolution. And his name, I saw his name, and I'm just going to try to say it. It's going to be completely mispronounced.
You got this.
Jean-Baptiste Donation de Vimeur Comte de Rochambeau. That is whose name is that long? Come on.
That's what I was going for. Like, that's my baby list name.
That's why they only say Rochambeau in the musical.
Yes. Although maybe that would add an extra flow in there. Try to speed rap through that. Maybe Diggs couldn't handle that one.
Oh, yeah, it's so much more than he would be able to handle. Like, he couldn't do that.
So what else do we know about Rochambeau?
Yeah, the Count de Rochambeau was basically, in rank, he was Washington's equal. Washington was the commander-in-chief of the American army, and Rochambeau was the commander-in-chief of the French forces. They did come to an uneasy agreement, specifically at the beginning of their alliance, where the American officers would technically be able to outcommand the French officers of even the same rank. And so Washington was very happy with this agreement, where they were basically... The French came over and they said, look, this is your fight. We're here to help you,
Yeah.
and we're going to be going along with this.
Makes sense.
That agreement made Washington very happy, but I read in James Thomas Flexner's biography on Washington how Rochambeau was acting under secret orders as well.
Whoa.
So they had this public acknowledgement that the American soldiers would be in charge, but specifically, let me just read this quote from it. To avoid being entangled with the provincial amateurs, Rochambeau, quote, was instructed not to allow a pretense of subservience to make him follow Washington into any strategy of which he disapproved. So basically, Rochambeau was technically going along with Washington, but he was not impressed with Washington's strategies. Remember, Washington lost a lot of fights. He lost way more than he won.
Yeah.
Which he's going to be talking about in the next song.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so true. And so when Rochambeau comes over, he lands on the American shore, and he doesn't immediately meet with Washington. He refuses to step off of his ship and to leave his particular regiment until the entire French army comes over. He wanted to be able to come in with all of his troops and all of his supplies at once. And so he basically...
It's a little more epic.
It is a little more epic of an entrance until you realize that he's just sitting there for a couple months,
I guess so.
not doing anything, waiting.
Is he ever going to come off that ship?
Right.
I don't know.
So for the first couple months of their interactions, Rochambeau and Washington only interacted through mediators, through go-betweens who basically came to one another and said, hey, this is what Rochambeau wants to do. Hey, this is what Washington wants to do. And they would kind of go back and forth. And Rochambeau was so unimpressed with Washington that he really was kind of a little bit snooty towards him. They had one particular meeting where Washington officially said, okay, we officially need to meet. So they come together. He didn't want to send his war plans in a letter.
Yeah.
And he gets this meeting together. And Rochambeau basically comes in and he comes at Washington with a barrage of questions like, hey, how much money is your Congress going to raise in the next year for this wartime strategy? How many forces is your Congress going to be able to rally between now and the next big war? And so he goes into all these things that Washington specifically could not answer because Rochambeau was used to organized warfare.
Yeah.
He was used to a specific way of doing things. He wasn't very impressed with this guy who was basically throwing up beacons of hope, saying, well, we can do this. We can overcome.
Welcome to America.
This is the American way.
I'm thinking Rochambeau and Lee would have been friends.
Yeah, probably.
Charles Lee, he did not like Washington, so.
I'm thinking Lafayette might have gotten frustrated with Rochambeau. Plans? Who needs plans? Let's go attack!
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
I mean, obviously Lafayette had plans, but...
It does bring up an interesting point. I read that when they were creating the war plan for the Battle of Yorktown specifically, Washington, again, didn't want to send those specific plans in a letter because they might be intercepted by the British. And so he called for Lafayette to take his forces and go towards Yorktown, wherein Lafayette was heading towards Philadelphia, where he thought there was going to be this big battle. He was going to engage in some really important stuff, but then he gets this letter from Washington sending him to this podunk town. He didn't think it was important. He thought, I'm just going off on this useless little mission, and he was really upset when he first heard the command to go meet him in Yorktown. But then very quickly, Lafayette's a very smart man. He realizes what's happening. They create this strategy to basically end this war in Yorktown to where he can cut the forces off at sea, because the British were very, very good at their naval strategy. They had a great navy at the time compared to the American colonies, at least. And so the plan was that Rochambeau would take his troops from the port side, from the ocean, and then all of the American forces would come up and they'd surround the fort at Yorktown. Basically, any type of 18th century fort, if you surround it enough, cut it off from supplies, it's going to fall. And so Cornwallis was protecting a huge amount of the British forces there. They had a strategy set in place for all of the French forces and the American forces to come up to Yorktown, and they were going to end this war. And really, what we'll see really soon when we actually get into this war, for the Battle of Yorktown at least, we're going to see that it is the last major land struggle in this particular war.
Yeah, as Lafayette says in the song, we can end this war at Yorktown, cut them off at sea, but for this to succeed, there is someone else we need.
Hamilton!
I was waiting for it. Which is actually really interesting. You'll see here Lafayette is, in the song, asking Washington, come on, we need Hamilton. He's good at this. He can do this. But in history, Lafayette actually wanted to promote one of his aides to lead this charge to Yorktown, and Hamilton had to come and appeal to Washington, and Washington decided over Lafayette that he was gonna go with Hamilton.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's great.
But narratively, that's not the case. We have Lafayette here saying he's good in the trench, he's fluent in French, which, I mean, he was raised in St. Croix, so he knows French. His mother was of French descent.
I like how at the end you get Washington doing his thing. And when I say Washington, I'm really saying Chris Jackson, the guy that sings, because he starts singing and you're just like, wow, I bow down to you.
That
he has
voice,
most just smooth,
so
gorgeous voice. And it's such a perfect, stately, regal voice for Washington. And it leads into the next song where he has his solo that's just,
Yeah.
I've heard he changes it up every night. Like he just
really,
the way he sings it, and I think I heard somebody in the pit, I don't know if it was the accompanist or whoever it was, would just like kind of sit and watch him and listen to what he was going to do that night.
Yeah, he owns the stage when he's on it. I feel like his voice is this the first moment in the musical where we actually hear Washington sing? Like, he's been speaking and he's rapped a couple moments, but I think this
he sings in the first song. The very
Alexander,
first song.
the title song.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so this is really this might be the first time when he's singing as someone we know, though. Yeah. He's introduced himself as Washington. He's acting as the commander in chief, not just a narrator.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Lin-Manuel has brought up before that he purposely wrote this character to sing or talk normally. He's regal. He doesn't really rap. But when he gets frustrated or angry, he starts rapping. Yeah. And it's like that's his passion there. He jumps right in.
Speaking of amazing voices, Philippa Sue, that is Eliza.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about that.
Oh, my gosh. So unbelievable. Cool. And I think she was trained at Juilliard, so she has a very classical background. And you can tell by the way she controls her voice, and just it's unbelievable. They have this thing called Ham for Ham, where they do these fun little video shows. And they did one of her singing this opera aria, and she just blows you away. Lin-Manuel's watching her in the background, and you can just see his face like, oh my gosh, she is ridiculous. Like,
it blows us all away.
Exactly. She's just unbelievable.
Oh, yes.
Just had to give a little shout out to her. I believe she goes by Pippa. It sounds very British.
I did not know that.
And she's also half Asian.
She has a fantastic performance. Every time you see a clip of her on stage, she has so much like sass and attitude and just the right amount of confidence and everything she does. Her performance is phenomenal, fantastic.
Yeah, the casting in this show is really just perfect.
The reason I brought up Philippa or Pippa being half Asian is there are very few Asians on Broadway. They are not usually well represented unless it's like Miss Saigon or something like that.
Right. The stereotypical role.
Yeah, and it's really cool how he uses all these different ethnicities in the show. There are very few Caucasian actors in the show. I think only King George and the guy that plays the loyalist.
Samuel Seabury.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've actually...
Are a couple of the only white people in the show.
Yeah, and I've actually seen, I don't know if it's the main person who plays Seabury, but or maybe his understudy, but I've seen at least some clips of there actually being a person of color playing that role as well.
Oh,
so
interesting.
there are white guys in the ensemble, though, specifically.
Yeah, in the ensemble.
And so there are like a number of people, a number of ethnicities on stage, but I love that point you bring up about how Lin-Manuel was talking about how growing up, there weren't a lot of roles for people like him and people that had the experiences that he had growing up, people that were in Washington Heights growing up with him, didn't have people to relate to on Broadway, but he wanted to make sure that his musicals were the kind of musicals that could relate to a diverse audience where people could say, look, I want to be like that person on stage. I can do this because now these roles exist in pop culture.
Yeah, that's the word for it right there, diversity. There's a beautiful amount of diversity in this show.
And they're getting ready to make it even more diverse. Had you heard about how they're going to let male and female audition for all the parts?
Oh, interesting.
Or as far as like Washington, Hamilton, it can be male or female.
Really?
That'll be interesting.
I'd love to see a female George Washington.
Yeah.
That type of a commentary and being the first president, being the first female president, it'd be an interesting political dynamic.
So Lafayette's argued with Washington to get Hamilton off the bench, which is an interesting phrase because usually we use that as a sports metaphor. Someone's on the bench, they're on the sidelines. But Hamilton's a lawyer. He's on the bench, literally.
Oh, interesting. Nice little double entendre again. So Washington very quickly agrees that he needs to get Hamilton back into the trenches with him. So he sends this letter specifically saying, Alexander Hamilton, troops are waiting in the field for you. It's what he's been asking for this entire musical. He's finally going to be given his large command to have the potential of becoming a celebrated war hero.
Which brings us into History Has Its Eyes on You.
Right. And so we've seen in the previous song, Eliza gives Hamilton this opportunity to stay and let his family be his legacy. Here Washington presents the other option in front of him, saying, here, let this war hero be your legacy. Let that be the thing you take on. And the decision's in front of him, and our protagonist has to choose one or the other. And he chooses, as he does frequently throughout this musical, the public figure rather than the private one.
Yeah. So we see in this song that Washington kind of sees Hamilton as a younger version of himself coming into this war.
Well, and he's warning him that it's not all just glory and fame. It is hard, and you have to make hard choices, and you're going to mess up a lot of the time.
Yeah. And he even mentions like he is messed up. And actually in history, Washington is at least in a big part to blame for the French and Indian War starting because of I guess bad decision that he made leading his men into a massacre, which he mentions there.
It says, I made every mistake, and even now I lie awake knowing history has its eyes on me. Like, he knows all those decisions he made. History is always going to remember.
And so here you see the recurrence of this theme of who tells history, who controls that narrative, who is the one, because you don't have any control over who lives, who dies, and who tells your story. You don't get to control what they say about you. You just get to control your own actions in the heat of it all. And so be aware that everything you're doing right now is going to have repercussions that'll ripple throughout history because everyone is looking at you now. You're in a place of prominence, so be careful.
That makes me think of Wait For It, when Aaron Burr's talking about, I am the one thing in life I can control.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that it's not just a narrative thing they're doing here in the musical. If you read the histories and the letters that these guys were writing, they know that they're making history and they know that historians are going to talk about them. This is something that they discuss. it's fascinating to me in our current situation, our current lives. I don't look around thinking, what will a historian talk about Vinton when I die?
Yeah.
No one's going to talk about me, I don't think, unless something crazy happens in the next few years.
Right.
But they knew that something big was going on and they were going down in history.
Yeah, I help mentor teenagers in my church a lot, and I was talking recently with one of the teens who has a very charismatic leadership personality, and I was just kind of telling him, look, because of who you are and the gifts you have and the place where you are in life, you don't really get to choose whether or not you are a leader. You get to choose what type of a leader you're going to be. Are you going to be a leader who leads people with a positive impact, or does these things to lead people in a certain way? Or are you going to be a leader who distracts from that and brings people down another route? Because at this moment, Hamilton has the potential to rise up to greatness, or he has the potential now to go down in ridicule and in shame. And Washington says, I'm very aware of the things that bring me shame, but I'm pressing on because I can't live in that shame. I can't identify with that guilt. I'm going to make decisions now that I am going to be proud of in the future. I'm going to make decisions now that history can look back on and affirm my character, my decisions, and know that I was on the track where I needed to be.
Right.
I love how this comes back later in Hurricane. It's when he's trying to figure out what to do about his scandal. He's obsessed with his legacy, and he's more worried about his legacy as an American revolutionary leader than he is about his own family. And anyway, when he's trying to decide what he's going to do, and he decides to write the Reynolds pamphlet for some horrible reason, during that song, you hear them singing "History Has Its Eyes on You." He's thinking about that when he's writing the Reynolds pamphlet later on. And then later on, at the very end of the show, is the song "Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story?"
Yep.
And it comes back, it's just...
Yeah, I love that metaphor that what is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see.
So that brings us to the end of History Has Its Eyes on You and to the end of our episode. Next week, we're going to be going into all that is the Battle of Yorktown. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
this has
for
been
having
great.
me.
Yeah.
Such good insight. We appreciate it.
It was really fun. Thanks, guys.
So we have a new promotion we're going to try out, and I'm going to hand it over to MC Robbie to tell you a little bit about it.
Okay. Hashtag Hamilton Podcast. It's what we do. So get on iTunes and leave us a review and let us know when you do, because we'll try to spit a rhyme or two to say we appreciate you. Although it's true, we're really not a rapping crew, but I'm sure you already know it. Like Philip Hamilton, I'm an amateur poet, but I hardly ever get to show it. So look up Hamilton the Podcast and let us know what you think. Whether you think we stink or we're all that in the kitchen sink, we value your thought, and we like you a lot. And for right now, that's all the rhyming I've got.
Yeah, so like Robbie said, if you leave us a review on iTunes, we would like to record a little something for you. So get in contact with us if you have already left us a review, or if you do leave us one here in the future. Either email us at contact@graphocast.com, graphocast.com, or on our Graphomania Twitter, which is @Graphocast, or on our personal Twitters, and we'll try to record something and get it sent to you.
Yeah, we'll record like a 15 to 30 second little rap for you, or rhyme or poetry thing. And Vinton, you're a bassist, so why don't you add a little bit of like a bass line underneath what I say? Like, let's have some fun. Okay.
Until next time, I'm Vinton Bayne @FleshEater on Twitter.
And I'm Robbie Hurlocker @Alpha Knight.
And I'm Amanda Fortney. Thanks for having me.
This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, graphocast.com. Follow us on Twitter @Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.